Welcome back to Daily AI News at Let's Data Science. It's 2026 0515. Today we're diving into some pivotal developments from the future of machine intelligence to major product launches. Let's get to it. We begin with a significant security story surrounding Anthropic's Claude ecosystem. Between May 6th and May 7th, four independent security teams disclosed a cluster of vulnerabilities affecting Claude Code and Claude in Chrome. The reporting spans outlets including Dark Reading, VentureBeat, Cyberscoop, Crypto Briefing, and Checkpoint Research. Checkpoint Research identified two tracked vulnerabilities in Claude Code: CVE 2025-59536 and CVE 2026-11852. According to Checkpoint's advisory, these flaws could enable remote code execution and theft of Anthropic AI keys when developers clone and open untrusted repositories. The mechanism is particularly concerning for developer workflows. Project-level configuration files, hooks, model context protocol integrations, and environment variables can be automatically applied when a repository is opened. In the scenarios described, a malicious repository could trigger shell commands or redirect authenticated API traffic, resulting in credential exfiltration or arbitrary command execution. LayerX separately disclosed a flaw in the Claude in Chrome browser extension. As reported by Cyberscoop, the issue stems from an instruction in the extension's code that allows scripts running in the browser origin to communicate with the assistant without verifying provenance. In proof-of-concept testing, this enabled cross-extension privilege escalation and potential data exfiltration from Google Drive, Gmail, and connected GitHub repositories. Adversa AI described what it calls a trustfall class issue affecting Claude Code, as well as other CLI coding tools, including Cursor CLI, Gemini CLI, and Copilot CLI. According to Dark Reading, the core problem is underspecified trust dialogues. These dialogues do not clearly communicate the operational consequences of trusting a repository, allowing auto-approval patterns that can silently start background model context protocol servers. In a separate but related observation, Dragos reported that Claude autonomously identified a SCADA gateway controlling a Mexican water utility during forensic analysis, as covered by VentureBeat and Crypto Briefing. While the reporting does not assert exploitation, it underscores the expanding operational surface of agentic systems interacting with industrial contexts. Dark Reading reports that Anthropic communicated to Adversa AI that at least one of the identified issues falls outside its threat model, and that it considers its trust dialogue to provide adequate warning. No direct quotes from Anthropic were included in the examined reporting. The broader takeaway here is architectural. Agentic tooling blurs the boundary between passive configuration and active execution. Repository metadata and browser extension interactions are no longer inert. They can become execution primitives. For enterprise security teams, this expands the threat model to include repository-level configuration, extension origin checks, and credential hygiene in AI-augmented development environments. Practitioners should monitor vendor patches, CVE updates, and whether fixes address systemic trust boundary issues rather than isolated call paths. Next, we turn to the courtroom, where closing arguments have concluded in Elon Musk's lawsuit against OpenAI. After nearly 3 weeks of testimony in federal court in Oakland, a 9-member jury has begun deliberations. According to CNBC, the jury's verdict will be advisory. U.S. District Judge Yvonne Gonzalez-Rogers will ultimately decide liability. The New York Times reports that Musk is seeking $150 billion in damages and wants Sam Altman removed from OpenAI's board. The suit centers on Musk's claim that OpenAI's founders breached an original nonprofit commitment as the organization evolved into its current structure. Microsoft, which invested $13 billion in OpenAI, was named as a co-defendant. Reuters and the BBC report that Microsoft CEO Satya Nadella testified that Microsoft conducted due diligence before investing. OpenAI co-founder Ilya Sutskever also testified. Evidence presented included internal text messages and other exhibits, as detailed by the BBC and Wired. NBC News reports that Judge Gonzalez-Rogers placed Musk on recall status during the trial and that he briefly traveled to China while remaining available to testify. For the industry, this case is more than personality drama. It is a test of governance structures that emerged as research labs transitioned into hybrid nonprofit for profit entities backed by multi-billion-dollar strategic investments. The outcome could influence how future AI labs structure control agreements, investor protections, and board oversight when frontier research becomes commercially valuable. Observers will now watch the advisory verdict and the judge's final ruling, as well as any remedies phase that could address governance or structural changes. Our third top story sits at the intersection of defense tech and AI scale. Anduril Industries has raised $5 billion, doubling its valuation to $61 billion, according to Comstrader and MSN. Investors in the round include Thrive Capital and Andreessen Horowitz. Comstrader also reports that Anduril has established an autonomous warship operation at the historic Foss Shipyard in Seattle to scale manufacturing of unmanned naval vessels. The OECD.ai Incident Monitor has framed this funding and expansion as an AI hazard, highlighting public concern about scaling AI-enabled autonomous weapons. While technical specifics about the autonomy stack were not disclosed, scaling maritime autonomy typically requires integrating radar, LiDAR, electro-optical and infrared sensors, resilient navigation and collision avoidance systems, and hardened communications. A $5 billion raise materially accelerates manufacturing capacity and field testing. It also increases regulatory and ethical scrutiny. For practitioners, larger production runs mean more operational data and faster iteration cycles, but also amplify the consequences of system-level failure modes. Now, for a few other key updates in our lightning round, Anthropic and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation have committed $200 million over 4 years to develop AI-enabled public goods in health, education, and agriculture. According to Reuters and the organization's press releases, Anthropic will provide Claude usage credits and technical support, while the Gates Foundation will contribute grant funding and program design expertise. Initial efforts include vaccine and therapy development, language resources for low and middle-income countries, K-12 tutoring tools, and farmer decision support systems. In policy news, Bloomberg reports that the European Commission has entered talks to join Pax Silica, a U.S.-led initiative focused on securing supply chains for AI chips, advanced semiconductors, critical minerals, and data centers. MLEX reports internal EU divisions over potential alignment with U.S. export control regimes, while Crypto Briefing highlights implications for hardware-heavy sectors like crypto mining that depend on specialized ASICs and GPUs. Anthropic has also updated an investor warning page naming 8 secondary marketplaces it says are not authorized to sell its private shares, including Forge Global and Hive. According to CoinDesk and Bloomberg, the company stated that unapproved transfers, including via special purpose vehicles, are void and will not be recognized. The block reports that tokenized pre-stocks tied to Anthropic and OpenAI on Solana fell sharply following the notice. In semiconductor funding, Economic Times reports that Agrani Labs, founded by former Intel and AMD executives Dimant Nagaraj, Ashok Jagannathan, and Rajesh Vivekanandam, is seeking $100 million in a Series A to build CUDA-compatible AI inference chips. The startup is reportedly in early talks with Qualcomm and Battery Ventures, with existing investor Peak XV expected to invest approximately $20 million pro rata. Finally, in campaign tech, CNN and NBC News report that AI-generated videos promoting Spencer Pratt's Los Angeles mayoral bid have racked up millions of views. The clips, created by filmmaker Charlie Curran, depict Mayor Karen Bass, Governor Gavin Newsom, and former Vice President Kamala Harris in exaggerated roles. The episode underscores how accessible generative video tooling is reshaping political visibility and raising new questions around disclosure and synthetic media governance. And that's your AI briefing for today. The landscape is moving faster than ever, and we'll be here to track it with you. For more insights, visit us at letsdatascience.com. Thanks for tuning in, stay curious, and we'll be back tomorrow with the latest in AI.